Writing a song doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, some of the best songs ever written are built on the simplest ideas. Today I want to show you how I'm approaching songwriting with a minimalist mindset, starting with just a basic harmonic sketch and gradually shaping it into something more defined. Minimalism in songwriting doesn't mean stripping everything away. Rather, it means focusing only on what's necessary to create an engaging and compelling song. It's about using just the right amount of harmony, rhythm and melody to make the song work without overloading it with unnecessary elements. By embracing this approach, we can make sure that every note, every chord and every rhythmic decision serves a purpose. I'm writing this song for a jam session with a friend, and that's a big part of why I'm taking this minimalist approach. When you're playing live with someone, you don't want to be bogged down with overly complex arrangements. You need something that's flexible, that grooves, and that leaves room for improvisation. A strong foundation of chords, rhythm and melody makes it easier to lock in together and build something in the moment. Plus, I like the challenge of making something compelling without relying on excessive layers of production tricks. It's about stripping things back to the essence of what makes a song work and letting the music breathe. So I've got this idea for a song in the key of C major, or at least a short chord progression that I like the sound of, and I want to use this as a starting point to work with. It's C major, E major, F major and F minor. That E major chord is a secondary dominant. It pulls towards A minor, but instead of resolving to 6, I'm taking it to 4, which shares 2 notes in common with A minor. Then I'm borrowing the F minor chord from the C minor key, which adds a bit of colour and emotion to the progression. It also provides a nice comparison when played right next to the major 4 chord on the same root. So this progression could be written as 1, 5 of 6, 4, minor 4. Despite being played with basic chords, this provides interest in harmonic depth. I'm thinking that I want to use this as a repeated chorus progression, keeping things simple with just 1 chord per bar. Let's now look at sketching out the verse chords. The goal here is just to have a skeleton idea for a jam and songwriting session, so having a verse and chorus will be more than enough to go on. I've recently been playing around with the Mixolydian mode. This is just the major scale with a flattened 7th note. The flattened 7th degree imparts a distinctive sound to the Mixolydian mode, often described as bold, bluesy or relaxed. This quality makes it a popular choice in various musical genres, including blues, rock, jazz and folk. The mode's association with the dominant 7th chord contributes to its characteristic tension and release, providing a sense of movement and resolution within a composition. You can take any mode and use it to construct chords, much like major or minor keys. For example, look at the chords in the key of C major and the chords in C Mixolydian. You can see that there are just 3 chords which are different. The 3 chord is diminished, the 5 chord is minor, and we have a major chord built on the flat 7. Using these chords will help us to establish a Mixolydian feel rather than a major feel. For me, and many classic rock songwriters, using the flat 7 chord really gives a Mixolydian edge to a progression. I really like the blend of the 1, flat 7 and minor 5 chord, so after playing around with it a bit, here's the verse progression I landed on. So if you're stuck when starting to write a song, just take any existing progressions that you might have, no matter how boring or vanilla they may be. Next, we'll look at transforming them into something more interesting. At this stage, I wanted to show you how I was going to develop some ideas on the guitar, but all I have is this battered old acoustic with no way of recording it properly, and a dying laptop that would struggle even if I had the right gear. If you want to support me in making better music content, consider heading over to ko-fi.com/writeasong. It would mean a lot and help me take these videos to the next level. Link is also in the description. The first thing to consider once you've got some chords sketched out is harmonic rhythm, or more simply, how often the chords change. If you change chords once per bar or any other frequency that doesn't change, then it soon becomes boring and predictable. So you need to mix it up a bit. This doesn't have to be anything extraordinary. It could be that you take sections and change chords twice per bar before going back to once per bar. This is what happens in the verse, with some chords carrying over bars to add a bit of interest. I'll also use that for the chorus repeat in a moment. Doing this adds pace to sections, where we double the rate at which the chords change. If you want something to stand out even more, you can change chords off the beat. In 4/4 time there are 4 beats in the bar. If you change chords between these beats, then you generate a syncopated feel, which immediately stands out. For example, here's an alternative version of the verse with some changes off of the beat. Another easy thing that we can do to improve even the most basic progression is to use inversions. The simplest chords, like major and minor, have 3 notes in them and are called triads. Usually the lowest note is the root note. That is the note that the chord is named after. For example, F and F minor chords have the root note of F. But if you play one of the other chord notes as the lowest, then it is called an inversion. Playing the 3rd note in the bass is called a first inversion, and playing the 5th note in the bass creates a second inversion. Inversions are an easy way to create a different feel without playing any new chords. They can also allow us to generate more interesting bass lines. With that in mind, I want to use them for the repeat of the chorus chords. First up, I'll play the 1 chord C major in first inversion. This puts the E note in the bass. This means that it shares a bass note with the next chord, E major. This allows them to blend more seamlessly together. I then split the next bar in 2, moving from E major to the first inversion. Listen to how this now feels like 2 different chords. E major in first inversion puts the G sharp note in the bass. This sets us up nicely for a move to the F chord in first inversion. The reason is the first inversion F chord has A in the bass, so we've set up a pleasing G sharp to A chromatic bass line. Then to end, I play F minor in first inversion, which puts A flat in the bass, which is the enharmonic equivalent of G sharp. So we've got a nice back and forth in the bass. Here's how the whole chorus sounds now with the standard version and the inversions. Now you've got a great progression that you could take and write a melody for. But if you want to enhance things further, you can start to think about more complex chords with 4 or more notes. This can allow you to carve out unique sounds and feelings, but it also comes with denser, more challenging chords to play. This is where the minimalist approach can help us. Let's start in the verse. In Mixolydian songs, you can play the flat 7 as major 7th, the 5 as minor 7th, and the 1 chord as a dominant 7th. This gives the 1 chord a bluesy, harder edge familiar to rock and blues. So I'll use these in the first 4 bars of the verse. Even though these are 4-note chords, you can change things up by using partial voicings. The most critical notes, also called the guide tones, in any type of 7th chord is the 3rd and the 7th. So what we can do is just play these 2 notes for these 7th chords and then allow the bass to fill in the root and the 5th. This separates the chord out amongst instruments, giving the listener a different experience, but you still get the overall feel of the chord. The only other chord to note in the verse is at the end. In the first pass I just played the minor 5 chord, but in bar 8 I now play G dominant 7. This isn't in the C Mixolydian, but it's in C major. It sets up the strongest possible cadence when the C major is heard at the beginning of the chorus, so it makes the key change really clear. In the chorus I also use partial chord voicings, but these are mainly 5 chords. And these are common on the guitar. You might know them as power chords. They lack any sort of 3rd note, so are neither major nor minor. When I write the melody, I will fill in some of these notes, but for now, just listen to the final chords with the bass. The bass is mainly playing root notes and 5th notes, spelling out the chords as we go. It also adds some more rhythmic interest. The piano moves between full chord voicings and partial chord voicings to provide contrast and interest. When thinking about playing this with my friend, we have a few options. We could use bass and acoustic guitar, bass and piano, or let the piano take over bass duties and do piano and acoustic guitar. Always consider how you're going to arrange your progressions once you've written them. With that in mind, I want to move my attention to the melody now. As I've mentioned, with this minimalist approach, many of the chord voicings we've used have left plenty of open space, so now it's time to fill that in with some melodic goodness. My overall aim for the melody, and something you'll encounter a lot, is to have the highest point of the melody be heard in the chorus. This elevates the chorus up and makes it stand out more. In order to do this, I deliberately start the verse in a lower octave to give us room to move up to. When thinking about melody, you often have to consider the range of the voice of the person who will sing it if you have lyrics. too wide a range and they might struggle. In this example, the melody is instrumental, so this isn't as much of a concern. But melodies that jump all over the place can sound incoherent and hard to follow, so it's still well worth experimenting with, regardless of who or what is performing the melody. A general tip for writing melodies is to have a mixture of chord and non-chord tones. Notes that are in the underlying chord and the melody at the same time have less tension than notes which are from the key but not in the chord. Chromatic notes from outside of the key will have even more tension. So starting down on the low G, we step up to B flat. This combined with the C major 1 chord confirms that we are in C mixolydian. Then over these 7th chords with their guide tones, I don't stray far from the chord notes. This gives the bass the space to play the root and 5th. Note how you still clearly get the sense of these 7th chords here. Then over the C dominant 7th we jump up to the high G, which is the 5th of the chord but not played in the partial voicing. This run-up features again over the borrowed G7 chord at the end of the verse to launch us up to the higher chorus. Then we step back down over the D minor chord. Sculpting melodies is often a balancing act of mixing jumps or leaps like this with steps to maintain interest. In the second half of the verse I use a common melodic idea. I take the rhythm of the first 4 notes in bar 1 and repeat it, but with different notes. This provides something familiar for the listener to grab hold of, but with a new twist. Then I just repeat the phrase again as the chords change. This is a great technique because it is really easy to do, and some of the melodic notes change from chord tones to non-chord tones, providing pleasing tension. Here's how the complete verse sounds. Then we get to the power chord chorus. Look at bar 1 with the C5 chord. This has the notes C and G. When we play F and D, we are essentially filling out the rest of the chord. The E is the 3rd note in C major, which reinforces the major sound. The F note is a 4th or 11th, which makes the first bar spell out a C add 11 type sound. This way of thinking about melody can help you if you want to achieve a certain sound that you associate with a particular chord. Over the secondary dominant power chord, we play G sharp. This is a note from outside of the key, but it's the 3rd of the E major chord, so it doesn't sound out of place here, it just has a satisfying tension. This is continued over the F chord where we set up a descending phrase from A to F. This comes back at the end of the bar but with the A flat note, and this is tense and alien over the F chord, but it's setting us up for the F minor chord to come, acting like a signpost to the flat 3rd note in that chord. The whole melody then repeats, but over the inversion changes which once again give the song a fresh feel here. We end up by descending down to the root note C in order to set up the next part of the song to be written. Let's listen to the complete song now. The problem with this minimalist approach is it relies on you knowing how the original chords were cut down. Learn how to do this in a variety of ways by watching the video on screen now.